It's Wednesday. You know what that means. Time for the Southern California Writers Association Hump Day Book Tour. I'm your host, Maddie Margarita, here with Diana Pardee on tech. Every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m., the Southern California Writers Association turns our Facebook page over to a different writer to explore their work and their books. This morning, we're pleased to have with us Sheila Lowe. Sheila writes stories of psychological suspense that put ordinary people into extraordinary circumstances. Like her fictional character, Claudia Rose, in the award-winning Forensic Handwriting series, Sheila is a real-life forensic handwriting examiner who is recognized as an expert in the court system. She also writes the Beyond the Veil paranormal suspense series and nonfiction books about handwriting and personality. Good morning, Sheila.
Good morning. Good to see you.
You must be excited about your new book.
I am. It comes out 2 weeks from yesterday.
Wow. Okay. So do you want to talk a little bit about Dead Letters and maybe the series?
Oh, just give me a second and I'm happy to do that. I'll show you the cover, Dead Letters.
Which is a great cover.
Love the cover. I love it. And the book does take place partly in Egypt, but it also goes to other places too. But because I've always had this affinity for ancient Egypt, that's what I decided I wanted on the cover. And I have a mummy behind me that's going to be coming with me to my launch party. So people can stick their face through there and have their picture taken as a mummy, because Egypt. But Claudia also goes to Gibraltar and to the UK in a search for her young niece who's missing from a dig site. Monica has been in the series kind of in a very quiet role in the background, but now she comes to the forefront. She's had a kind of a sheltered life because her mom died when she was 12, and her dad has been really protective of her. But now she's 18, she's going to assert her independence, and she's gone on this dig site to Egypt, where she disappears with a young archaeologist who has kind of a shady past. And so why doesn't her dad go looking for her? Because he's arrested. He's gone to his college reunion in Tucson, and there he's arrested for murder of an old enemy of his. So Claudia has to be the one to take off and go around the world looking for Monica.
It sounds great, and I love the settings. They're so interesting and exotic and full of mystery in themselves. But just when you say Egypt and Gibraltar and those places, they all have their own essence. So, but tell us a little bit about Claudia Rose and the series. And when you conceived of her, did you ever think, oh my gosh, she's going to have to carry 8 books?
No, I just wanted to write a book. I wanted to write a mystery ever since I was 8 years old and got my first mystery on my birthday. I loved mysteries, and as I grew, I wanted to start writing one, but it wasn't until I was, a lot older that I actually sat down and started to write. I'd written nonfiction books and lots of articles and things, but people say, write what you know. And so I decided to use a handwriting analyst because, most of the work I do in handwriting is pretty prosaic, but occasionally there are some interesting kinds of kernels for plots. And so I picked one, and a woman that I knew, this was way back around 1990, this happened. A woman that I knew who was the kind of person that you love-hate. She was a real backstabber, but somehow she had a charm that she sucked you in. Anyway, she died, and it was ruled a suicide, but there was a lot of evidence that maybe it wasn't. And so I decided to use parts of her story to write this book, Poison Pen. And at the time, I was a lot younger than I am now. And so I started Claudia in her late 30s. And she's a modern woman. She's an independent woman. She's relationship shy. And so those are kind of, her relationship shyness is an ongoing theme. So, although she does meet her love interest in the first book, whose name I regret making so difficult because nobody knows how to pronounce it. It's Joel Jovanic.
Well, see, people, but that's the name people won't forget, Sheila.
Let's hope.
Yeah. So, well, that's interesting. So, you wrote that first book, and then what happened?
Well, because I had already written 2 very well received nonfiction books, I figured that was, smooth sailing. I would just get it published right away. And a friend of mine talked me into entering the first 20 pages into the Southwest Writers Competition. And I won 3rd place out of like 95 mysteries, which I thought was pretty good. Although I would have rather won first place, but 3rd place wasn't bad. And the judges were Sarah Ann Freed from Mysterious Press and Tom Colgan, who's the head editor at Penguin Berkeley. And Sarah Ann, on her critique, wrote, "I love the characters. They're slightly over the top in a Jackie Collins sort of way," which wasn't exactly what I had in mind. I didn't know I was writing over the top characters. So she said, at the dinner where I met her and Tom, because that was part of the prize, was having at the conference, being at the banquet with them. And she said, send the rest of the book to me. And a few months later, I wrote to her and I said, well, did you get the book? And she wrote back and said, I didn't like the characters. Just like, okay. Changed her mind. So it actually took another 7 years to get it published. I kept getting the feedback from Tom. Tom Colgan said he presented it to his committee, and they said they liked the story and they liked it, but it just wasn't strong enough. And I didn't know what that meant, and I kept trying to find out, and I kept getting this feedback from agents, it's not strong enough. But it wasn't until, several, 2006, 7, that I found out what that meant. And basically, it meant you got to cut out the adverbs, those ly words. There were way too many of those. And I learned this finally when I got an editor. And she pointed out that my character, Claudia Rose, she was always feeling guilty. And what she said was, people want a strong character. It's okay for them to have flaws, but they have to be basically strong. And so I thought, she's too much like me. So,
How did you figure out what that meant?
well, because this editor, Ellen Larson,
Mhm.
I came into contact with a small startup press, Capital Crime, and they had her as an editor, and she's the one that showed it to me.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And then you went on to write the series, but you mentioned Claudia's love interest.
Yeah.
And now, so not only did you write a character who had to sustain or who has to sustain a series, her love interest is also involved. So talk a little bit about how you built a character that was a love interest that was great for Claudia and one that you can sustain a relationship over the course of the series.
Yeah, well, let me first say that I didn't know I was going to write a series, but when Capital Crime, they sent Poison Pen out for review, and it got a starred review in Publishers Weekly, and Kristen Weber at Penguin got it. She read it, and she bought the first 2 books, and then the next 2. So the first 4 were published first with Penguin, and so then I realized I was writing a series, and Joel, who Claudia meets in the first book, is a homicide detective. So he's got stuff of his own, He's not an alcoholic or anything like that, as so many of the police characters are. But he's also had relationship issues. So they're both, they've got this little dance. And he gets very upset with her over the series because of the decisions she makes that get her involved in some of these cases, and there's always that tension between them. But people really seem to like their relationship, and it has progressed.
So that's interesting. So over the course of the book, when you're writing them and their interactions, do you think about the dynamics of their relationship, or does that just flow with the plot? Or
Yes, I do think about it because, especially because of this, when she says, I'm going to do something, like I'm going to fly to Egypt to look for my niece. In the previous books, he would have been fighting with her about it and like, that's stupid, don't do that, or I'm going to go with you. And he does offer to go with her. But now he's learned that it's not going to help if he fights it. And so he's had to learn to respect her ability to make those decisions for herself. And he does what he can to support her, but there's still, she knows he's thinking, what the hell are you thinking of?
right. So how is there like a type of plot that's a good one for Claudia Rose? Or are there plots or mysteries that you would not think would be good for her?
Hmm, that's a good question. I think, I've learned to look for themes in the books, and each of them seems to have a different theme. Like, for instance, book 4, Last Rites, is what I call my revenge book. I'll show you. See, I love this cover, this little girl. And it's my revenge book because it's about a religious cult and this little girl, another missing child, only this is a 3-year-old, is missing in a religious cult. And I grew up in what I now see as a religious cult. And so I got to, I got to describe a lot of those things. And I lost the plot. We're talking about plots, right? So
Yes.
yeah,
Are there good
and
plots for
themes.
her and not so good plots
I,
for
you
her?
know, I don't know. I've tried to make it varied and to not keep writing the same book over and over. But an interviewer once pointed out to me that there seems to be a mother-daughter theme that goes through my books, one way or
Interesting.
another. Yeah.
Interesting how people, well, in your line of work, you can see how people's actions and I guess physical characteristics and behaviors um, really telegraph what is inside. So let's talk well, we'll talk about that in a minute. But so how many years have passed over the course of the series? Now you've written, this is book 8. So
Yeah, and it was first published in 2007, Poison Pen, but I don't go sequentially, like what Michael Connolly did with Bosch, and he said he regretted doing that.
right.
So I just make it whatever it is. Each book is usually a few months or maybe a year after the last one. So even though 2007 to now, what is that, 14 years? I've made it. It's probably about 5 years.
That'd be interesting. So your experience as a handwriting expert, analyst, talk a little bit about that and how that informs your writing and your mysteries.
Well, Claudia and I do the same kind of work. So that part is easy for me. And because handwriting handwriting analysis is my platform, I have to put a certain amount of that in the books because some people read it for that. I would just like to be writing mysteries, but I know that people want to know about handwriting. And so I always make sure there's some of that in there. Um, she and I both do at least two kinds of work in that field, in that on the one side is handwriting analysis to determine personality traits. And so Claudia learns a lot about the people that she's dealing with. Like in Dead Letters, she comes across some handwriting of the young man that Monica has disappeared with, and that gives her some clues. And then there's some other things where she uses the other part of her skill, which is handwriting authentication, to determine, who wrote this. One, the personality is like, what caused the person to write this way? What in their life made their handwriting look like this? And the other is simply who wrote it.
Interesting. So tell us a little bit about handwriting analysis and how reliable or verifiable the interpretations are of handwriting.
Well, if it's done by a qualified person, it should be at least 85% accurate on all of the important points, which is, pretty high. It's higher than a lot of psychological tests. So we're looking at, there's a couple of different methods of handwriting analysis that are in use. And one of them is called trait stroke, which is empirical. And you look at each individual piece of the writing. It looks like it's like putting it under a microscope, and you build up a picture. It's atomistic. I don't find that very useful because you end up with a laundry list of traits, just a, contextless traits. So I use the Gestalt method, which looks at the handwriting like it's a picture. You're looking at the space, the way it's laid out on the paper, the form, which is the letter designs, and the movement, which is really complex, and that's things like the speed and the pressure and the rhythm. And in each of those categories, there are dozens, hundreds of other little elements to look at. And so that's like looking at handwriting through a telescope. It's looking at the whole picture. So you have a context.
So what kind of training did you have to have?
There isn't any have to have. There is no
Sure.
licensing for handwriting analysts. But I first 10 years, 1967, I got my first book in handwriting analysis that my future mother-in-law had read. So for 10 years, I studied on my own, and then I started taking courses. I studied with a guy named Charlie Cole, who was an internationally known handwriting analyst, and he had courses. And then I became certified and, took other courses and got really experienced.
So, but this is not just happenstance, right? Your analysis are verified or taken in court. You testify in court. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, when I go to court, 99% of the time, I'm testifying as an expert in handwriting authentication. We're not looking at the personality aspects. I have qualified to do that, but that's not usually why I'm there.
So interesting. I'd love to just talk to you about that. It's such an interesting topic. What are you working on now? And I know that you're probably consumed by the book launch right now, but are you working on another book, a Claudia Rose book, or?
No, I started another series, and it's called Beyond the Veil. And several years ago, after I left Penguin and didn't have a publisher, I wrote a standalone book called What She Saw. And it's a story of a young woman who wakes up on a train. And this is long before that book about the woman on the train. This is my woman on the train. And she doesn't know who she is. She's complete amnesia. And so that book explored a couple of themes that were of great interest to me, including amnesia. And then some years later, well, actually my last book was Proof of Life, which when I started writing it, I suddenly realized that the woman in What She Saw needed to be the protagonist in this story, and that a young man who was in my last Claudia book, Written Off, needed to be the love interest. And what made this book so very special was that my daughter, who was killed by her boyfriend in 2000, helped me write it from spirit. So this is now this young woman is hearing voices from the spirit world. And
yeah, I just got goosebumps. Well, great. That's you've written so many different things. So we can look for more in the Beyond the Veil series, right? Hopefully.
yeah, that's I sidetracked myself. That's the next one I'm going to write, and it's called The Last Door.
Okay, and if somebody is interested in Dead Letters, where can they find that?
Dead Letters is up for pre-order anywhere.
Don't you have a few book signings coming up? Or
Yes, I have. Well, I have a party I'm having here in Ventura. So far, 90 people are coming, and it's outdoors. Ooh. So you don't have to worry. Or if you're worried, you can wear a mask. It's at a restaurant here in Ventura by the beach, and everybody, as long as they last, everybody who comes is going to get an Eye of Horus. Ooh. That my sister painted very cleverly, and some other stuff, and we're going to have a lot of fun. But next month, I have a virtual signing with Book Carnival on the 18th. Oh. And then on the 21st, I will have an in-person signing in Huntington Beach. So
Okay, great.
would love to see people there.
Okay, well, perfect. We'll put that information in the chat room, and please on Mondays, let us know when that is so we can come out and support you. But we appreciate you being here. Best of luck in all your future books. We really, I think it's so interesting, and the settings are interesting. Smart heroines who solve mystery. Who doesn't love that? So good luck, Sheila. Thank you, everyone. This is interview number 49 for the Hump Day book tour, and we're coming up on 50. So we're excited we're celebrating that too. So we will see you next week here on the Southern California Writers Association. If you can't join us on Facebook, you can also see this interview on SCWA Writers Online on YouTube. Okay, so until then, we'll see you next week.